Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right, and yet somehow life keeps passing you by? You work hard, you make plans, you promise yourself that this time things will be different, but weeks go by, motivation fades, and somehow you find yourself standing in the same place again, wondering why progress feels so far away. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. Success rarely goes to the smartest person, or even the most talented. In fact, the real difference between the people who transform their lives and those who stay stuck often comes down to something surprisingly simple, something so ordinary that most people completely underestimate its power. In today's story, you'll meet a man who once felt invisible to the world. No recognition, no momentum, just the quiet frustration of watching others move forward while he stayed behind. But one small decision, a habit so simple almost anyone could ignore it, slowly turned his life in a completely different direction. And by the end of this story, you might realize something surprising. The same principle that transformed his life might be the exact key you've been missing in your own. So stay with me, because what this man discovered about consistency may completely change the way you think about success. Most people wake up before the sun, not because they're chasing a dream, but because responsibility knocks first. Alarm clocks ring, coffee brews, and another day begins almost exactly like the one before it. From the outside, everything looks normal. Work gets done, bills get paid, conversations happen. Yet somewhere beneath the routine, a quiet feeling lingers, a sense that life is moving, but somehow they are not. If you watched closely, you'd notice something else. People everywhere carrying invisible hopes inside them. A promotion they wish would come, a skill they wish they had mastered, a version of themselves they believe could exist someday. But day after day, that someday drifts further away. Not with a dramatic crash, but with slow, silent distance. Here's the strange part. Most of these people aren't lazy. They try. They start projects, read books, sign up for courses, make plans late at night when motivation feels strong. In those moments, the future seems wide open. It feels like the turning point is just around the corner. But then life settles back into its usual rhythm. A few weeks pass. The energy fades. The new habit disappears quietly, like footprints washed away by rain. And suddenly the old routine returns, stronger than before. Work, rest, distraction, repeat. Each unfinished attempt leaves behind something heavier than failure. It leaves doubt. That doubt begins whispering uncomfortable thoughts. Maybe success belongs to people with special talent. Maybe the lucky ones were simply born different. Maybe the world only notices certain kinds of people. And slowly, almost without realizing it, a person begins shrinking their expectations. The truth is, millions of people live inside this quiet cycle. They work hard, yet feel invisible. Their effort disappears into ordinary days that never seem to lead anywhere remarkable. Not because they lack dreams, and not because they lack ability, but because something subtle keeps interrupting progress. And the frustrating part? It rarely looks like a dramatic mistake. It's usually something small, something easy to overlook. A pattern that repeats quietly across months and years, slowly shaping a life without anyone noticing the pattern itself. But somewhere in this world, one man was about to discover that hidden pattern. At first, he believed he had the same problem everyone else had. Bad luck, lack of talent, invisible barriers. What he didn't realize was that his life was about to reveal a truth most people spend decades missing. And once that truth appeared, everything he believed about success, effort, and progress would begin to change in ways he never expected. Somewhere in the middle of a busy city lived a man most people never really noticed. He wasn't famous, powerful, or particularly remarkable in any obvious way. Just another face in crowded streets, another employee behind a desk, another quiet presence moving through ordinary days. If you passed him on the sidewalk, you probably wouldn't remember him 5 minutes later. His mornings followed a predictable rhythm. Alarm rings, quick breakfast, commute through traffic or packed buses. By the time he arrived at work, the world already seemed to be moving faster than he could keep up. Deadlines, meetings, small talk in hallways, everything happening around him like a current pulling him along. At work, he did what was asked. He wasn't incompetent, not at all. In fact, he often worked harder than many of the people around him. But somehow his effort never seemed to stand out. Promotions passed him by. Recognition went to others. The kind of praise he quietly hoped for always seemed to land somewhere else. And then there were his personal dreams. the ones he rarely spoke about. Late at night, when the world slowed down, he sometimes imagined a different version of his life, maybe starting a project, learning a new skill, building something meaningful that could change his future. In those quiet moments, hope flickered like a small flame. But the next morning, reality returned quickly. Bills, responsibilities, exhaustion. The flame of ambition dimmed under the weight of daily survival. Maybe later, he'd tell himself. Maybe when things calmed down. Of course, things rarely did. Even in conversations with friends, he often felt like the background character in someone else's story. People talked about their achievements, their opportunities, their plans. He smiled, nodded, listened. Yet inside, a question slowly grew louder. Why does it seem like everyone else is moving forward except me? The frustrating thing was that he truly wanted more from life. Not fame, not luxury, just progress. Just the feeling that his effort meant something. That the days he spent working, learning, and trying were quietly building toward something better. But instead, week after week slipped by with the same result. Effort in, ordinary outcomes out. And slowly, almost painfully, he began to wonder if perhaps he was simply the kind of person the world overlooks. What he couldn't see yet was that the real battle wasn't happening in his job, his environment, or even his opportunities. The real battle was forming inside his daily choices, hidden in a pattern he repeated again and again without noticing it. And that pattern was about to reveal itself in a way he could no longer ignore. At first, it didn't look like failure. In fact, it often began with excitement. Every few weeks, the man would feel a sudden surge of determination. Maybe it came after watching someone succeed, reading an inspiring story, or simply waking up with the feeling that things had to change. In those moments, the future looked wide open again, so he would start something new. A plan, a routine, a personal project. Sometimes it was learning a new skill after work, sometimes exercising early in the morning. Other times it was studying, writing ideas down, imagining how this time things would finally be different. For a few days, the momentum felt real. Those early days always felt powerful. Energy was high, motivation was strong, and progress seemed possible. He'd think, this is it. This is the moment everything turns around. And honestly, he wasn't imagining it. The beginning always felt promising. But then life would push back. Work would get stressful. A long day would leave him tired. One missed day would turn into two. The routine would weaken, the effort would shrink, and before long the plan quietly disappeared. At first he would tell himself it wasn't a big deal. Everyone loses motivation sometimes, right? He'd promised to restart soon. Tomorrow, next week, next month. There was always another moment waiting somewhere ahead. Yet something subtle was happening beneath the surface. Every unfinished attempt left a small crack in his confidence. Each abandoned effort whispered the same quiet message. Maybe you just don't follow through. The most dangerous part wasn't the failure itself. It was the pattern. Starting strong, fading out. Starting again, fading again. Over time, the excitement that once fueled new beginnings slowly turned into hesitation. Eventually, even when new ideas appeared, a voice in the back of his mind would say, "What's the point? You'll probably stop again anyway." And that's how a person slowly begins to feel trapped. Not because they lack dreams, but because their own past attempts start convincing them that change simply doesn't stick. What the man didn't realize yet was that this frustrating cycle wasn't proof of weakness. It was actually pointing directly toward the one mistake that had quietly been shaping his entire life. And very soon, a moment would arrive that forced him to face that truth head-on. Sometimes life doesn't whisper the truth gently. Sometimes it places it right in front of you, impossible to ignore. For this man, that moment arrived on an ordinary evening that would quietly become unforgettable. He was sitting in a small cafe after work, scrolling through his phone while waiting for his coffee. Nothing unusual about the scene. People chatting, cups clinking, soft music in the background. Just another tired day winding down. Until he saw something that made him pause. An old acquaintance had just posted a major achievement online. Someone he remembered clearly. Not smarter, not more talented, not someone who once seemed destined for greatness. Just another ordinary person from his past. Yet there it was. Success, recognition, progress. At first he tried to brush it off. Good for them, he thought. But the feeling didn't disappear. Instead, it grew heavier. Because deep down, he remembered something important. Years ago, they had both been standing at the same starting line. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen longer than necessary. A quiet question formed in his mind, one he had avoided for years. What exactly is different between them and me? The uncomfortable truth began surfacing piece by piece. It wasn't intelligence. It wasn't luck. It wasn't even opportunity. In fact, he could remember many times when he had started something with just as much enthusiasm as anyone else. But then another memory appeared, and another, and another. Projects abandoned halfway through, habits that lasted a week, goals that slowly dissolved the moment life became inconvenient. Right there in that small cafe, the realization landed with surprising clarity. The problem had never been a lack of potential. The problem had been something far quieter and far more dangerous. He hadn't been defeated by failure. He had been defeated by inconsistency. And once that thought appeared, he couldn't unsee it. For the first time in years, the man wasn't blaming circumstances, bad luck, or the world around him. Instead, he was staring directly at the one habit that had silently shaped his entire life. The question now wasn't whether he understood the problem. The real question was whether he would finally choose to do something different about it. That night, the man walked home slower than usual. The city lights flickered across the pavement, cars rushed past, and people hurried through their evening routines. But inside his mind, everything felt unusually quiet. The realization from the cafe kept echoing in his thoughts. For years he had chased motivation like it was the key to everything. Whenever he felt inspired, he would start something new with energy and optimism. And whenever that motivation disappeared, the effort disappeared with it. It had always felt normal, until now. As he replayed his past attempts, a pattern became painfully obvious. His success depended on how he felt. If he felt excited, he worked. If he felt tired, he stopped. If progress appeared quickly, he continued. If results were slow, he drifted away. Standing at a quiet crosswalk, he asked himself a simple question. What if motivation was never supposed to be the engine in the first place? That thought lingered longer than any motivational speech he had ever heard. Because if motivation wasn't reliable, then waiting for it had been quietly sabotaging him for years. By the time he reached his apartment, something inside him had shifted. Not a dramatic burst of energy, not a grand declaration about changing his life overnight, just a quiet, almost stubborn decision forming in the background. He sat at the kitchen table, grabbed a notebook, and wrote down a sentence that would change the way he approached every goal from that moment forward. I will stop relying on motivation. I will rely on consistency. The rule sounded almost too simple. No promises about massive progress. No unrealistic schedules. Just one commitment. Show up every single day, even when the excitement disappears. And strangely enough, that small rule felt more powerful than any plan he had made before. Because for the first time, he wasn't chasing a dramatic transformation. He was building something quieter. Something that could survive bad days, slow progress, and moments when nobody else noticed his effort. What he didn't realize yet was that this simple decision was about to lead him toward a discovery that would completely reshape how he understood success itself. Many of the stories you hear here aren't just stories. They reflect the invisible weight you may be carrying every day. If you're tired of holding pain, responsibility, and guilt that were never yours, I created an ebook called The Weight of Stones That Are Not Yours and More Too Bonus for you. It's for those who want to let go, set boundaries, and live with more lightness. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. The strange thing about life is that once a person becomes ready for a lesson, the world seems to place it right in front of them. Not with fireworks or dramatic music, but quietly, almost casually. For the man, that moment arrived a few days after his decision to rely on consistency. One evening, while wandering through a small bookstore near his apartment, he found himself standing in front of a shelf he had passed dozens of times before. Books about discipline, habits, personal growth. Normally, he would glance at them and move on. But that night, one sentence printed on the back of a book stopped him cold. It said something simple, almost obvious. Extraordinary lives are built through ordinary actions, repeated consistently. He read the sentence again, and then again. At first, it sounded too basic to matter, but the more he thought about it, the more it connected with the realization he had in the cafe. The problem had never been his effort. The problem had been that his effort came in bursts, powerful, but short-lived. Suddenly, pieces of the puzzle began fitting together. Maybe the people he admired weren't necessarily more talented. Maybe they had simply learned something he hadn't yet mastered, the quiet discipline of repeating small actions every day. He bought the book and spent the next few nights reading slowly, underlining ideas that felt strangely personal. One concept stood out above the rest. Consistency turns small actions into powerful forces over time. Think about it like planting seeds. One day of watering does almost nothing. A week might not show visible change either, but water the same soil every single day for months, and suddenly something alive begins growing beneath the surface. That idea began reshaping the way he looked at effort. Success wasn't a single breakthrough moment. It was a long chain of small, repeated actions stacking on top of each other. And if that was true, then his life hadn't been limited by ability. It had been limited by interruption. For years, he had been planting seeds and then walking away before they had time to grow. But now, for the first time, he was beginning to understand what real progress required. And that understanding was about to lead him to create a rule so simple, it would become the foundation of everything that followed. The man closed the book slowly that night, letting the idea settle in his mind. Extraordinary results, ordinary actions, repeated daily. The simplicity of it almost made him laugh. For years he had been searching for complicated answers when the real solution might have been hiding in plain sight all along. Instead of creating another ambitious plan that would collapse after a few weeks, he decided to do something different this time. Something smaller, something almost impossible to fail. He opened his notebook again and began writing a rule so simple it felt almost too modest to matter. One focused action every day toward his goal. Not 10 actions, not a perfect schedule, just one clear effort every single day. The rule was strict in only one way. The daily action could not be skipped, even if it lasted only 20 minutes, even if he was tired, even if progress seemed invisible. Think about how different that is from the way most people approach change. Many start with overwhelming expectations. 2 hours of work every day, a perfect routine, massive productivity. And when life interrupts that ideal plan, the entire system collapses. But his rule worked differently. It respected reality. Busy days, low energy, unexpected problems. None of these could break the system, because the requirement remained small and clear. Show up, do the work, repeat tomorrow. To make it real, he chose a specific focus. A skill he had always wanted to develop but had never maintained long enough to see results. Every evening, after work, he would dedicate at least a small window of time to practicing it. Some days it might be 30 minutes of focused learning. Other days it might be reviewing notes, practicing exercises, or studying examples from people who had mastered the craft. The exact activity could vary, but the rule remained unchanged. Never miss the daily effort. That rule began quietly reshaping his evenings. Instead of drifting into endless scrolling or television after work, he now had a small appointment with his future. A simple promise he kept with himself each night. At first, nothing remarkable happened. No breakthroughs, no sudden transformation. Just a man sitting at a table each evening, practicing something most people would have given up on after a few days. But what he couldn't see yet was that every small action was stacking on top of the previous one, like bricks forming the foundation of a structure that would eventually become impossible to ignore. And the real test of this system was about to begin. Because the early days of consistency are where most people quietly disappear. The first few days of his new rule felt surprisingly manageable. Each evening he sat down, opened his notebook, and completed his daily action. Nothing dramatic happened, but something felt different this time. The goal wasn't perfection. The goal was simply to show up. But as the second week approached, reality began pushing back. Work became stressful. One day he returned home exhausted after a long shift that seemed to drain every ounce of energy he had. The couch looked comfortable, the television inviting, and his mind whispered a familiar excuse. You deserve a break today. For a moment, the old pattern tried to return. Skip today, restart tomorrow. After all, one missed day wouldn't matter, right? He stared at the notebook sitting quietly on the table. The rule he had written down came back to him with surprising clarity. Never miss the daily effort. So instead of committing to a long session, he did something simple. He sat down for just 15 minutes. No pressure, no expectation of greatness, just the smallest version of the task he could complete. And strangely enough, that tiny act felt like a victory. The next few days brought similar tests. Rainy evenings, unexpected responsibilities, moments when motivation was nowhere to be found. Yet each time the same decision appeared: show up anyway, even if the effort felt small. What he was building wasn't just a skill anymore. He was building trust with himself. Every day he followed the rule, his identity shifted slightly. He was no longer the person who started strong and disappeared weeks later. He was becoming someone who kept promises, even small ones. Of course, the outside world didn't notice any of this yet. From the outside, nothing had changed. Same job, same routine, same quiet life. But beneath the surface, something powerful was forming, a rhythm of effort, and rhythms, when repeated long enough, begin shaping the direction of a life. What the man still couldn't see was how these quiet days of discipline were slowly preparing him for something unexpected. Because eventually, consistency begins to leave traces that the world can no longer ignore. Weeks began to pass, and something subtle started happening. At first, the man almost didn't notice it. The daily routine still felt ordinary. Come home, sit down, focus on his chosen skill, complete the small action, close the notebook. No applause, no dramatic progress, just quiet repetition. But slowly, the effort started leaving small footprints. Concepts that once confused him now made a little more sense. Tasks that used to take an hour now took 40 minutes. Mistakes that frustrated him in the beginning became easier to correct. None of these changes were dramatic, yet they carried a quiet significance. Progress had begun, and the most surprising part, it didn't feel like a sudden breakthrough. It felt more like watching the sunrise, gradual, almost invisible until suddenly the world is brighter. His confidence began growing in small ways too. Before, every new attempt had carried the fear of quitting again. But now he had evidence, day after day, of showing up. A chain of effort stretching further than any previous attempt in his life. That chain started changing how he saw himself. He wasn't someone who tried things anymore. He was someone who practiced daily. Even the way he moved through the world started shifting slightly. At work, he spoke with a little more certainty. In conversations, he felt less like the invisible background character he once believed himself to be. And interestingly, people began noticing something different about him. Nothing dramatic, just small comments. You seem more focused lately. You've been really consistent with that project, haven't you? Those words might have sounded simple to others, but to him they felt powerful, because for years nobody had associated him with persistence. But the truth was even more exciting than he realized. All these small improvements were only the beginning, because consistency has a strange effect over time. At first it creates small changes. Then those small changes begin stacking together, until eventually they produce a moment that feels almost sudden, a moment when the world finally sees what has been quietly growing beneath the surface. And that moment was closer than he thought. For a long time, the man's effort had felt like planting seeds in silence. Day after day, he showed up, practiced, learned, improved, yet the outside world still looked almost exactly the same. Same job, same apartment, same routine. If someone had asked him what had changed, the answer might have sounded unimpressive, but something important was happening beneath the surface. One evening at work, an unexpected opportunity appeared. A problem had surfaced on a project that nobody seemed eager to solve. It required a skill most people in the room didn't have the patience to develop. Normally, the man would have stayed quiet like he always did, but this time was different, because the skill required to solve that problem was exactly what he had been practicing every single evening. At first, he hesitated. Old habits whispered in his mind, "Stay quiet, let someone else take the risk." But then another thought appeared, the quiet confidence built from months of consistency. He raised his hand. The room grew quiet as he explained a possible solution. His voice wasn't loud or dramatic, but it carried something new: certainty. Not because he believed he was special, but because he had practiced the work behind the idea. Over the next few days, he focused intensely on the project, late evenings refining details, double-checking solutions, applying everything he had slowly learned during his daily sessions at home. And then, something remarkable happened. The solution worked. The project moved forward, the problem was resolved, and for the first time in years, people began looking at him differently. Not as the quiet background employee, but as someone capable, reliable, and prepared. Recognition arrived in small but meaningful ways. A manager's praise, colleagues asking for his input, opportunities appearing in conversations that once excluded him. That moment wasn't magic. It was the visible result of hundreds of invisible efforts stacked quietly behind the scenes. And as the man walked home that evening, He realized something powerful. The world had finally noticed. But the truth was, his transformation had begun long before anyone else could see it. And now that the momentum had started, the path ahead was about to change in ways he had never imagined. Something interesting happens when a person keeps showing up long enough. At first, the change is invisible. Then it becomes noticeable. And eventually, it becomes undeniable. For the man, that quiet shift began spreading into every corner of his life. The recognition he received at work wasn't just a one-time moment, because the habits that produced that result were still there. Every evening he continued his daily practice, building skill on top of skill, strengthening the discipline that had quietly reshaped his identity. Opportunities started appearing more frequently. Small projects turned into bigger responsibilities. Conversations with managers became discussions about future roles. People who once overlooked him now asked for his opinion, his input, his perspective, not because he demanded attention, but because his reliability had become obvious. But the most important transformation wasn't happening in his job. It was happening inside him. The man who once doubted his ability to follow through now carried a quiet certainty, not arrogance, not pride, just the calm knowledge that he could trust himself to keep going, even when progress was slow. His evenings looked different now too. Where he once spent hours distracted or exhausted, he now protected his daily effort like something valuable. That small window of focus had become a cornerstone of his life, a ritual that reminded him every day who he was becoming. Even his relationships began to shift. Friends noticed his discipline. Conversations about complaints and frustrations slowly turned into discussions about growth, goals, and ideas. Without trying to inspire anyone, he had quietly become the kind of person others respected. And the most fascinating part? The man who once believed he was invisible had become someone impossible to overlook, not through luck, not through sudden talent, but through something far more powerful. The unstoppable momentum created by showing up again, and again, and again. Yet his story was never meant to be only about him, because the real power of this journey lies in what it reveals for anyone watching. And the lesson waiting at the end of this story might be simpler and more life-changing than most people expect. If you looked at the man now, you might assume his story was about talent finally revealing itself, that somewhere along the way he discovered a hidden gift that changed everything. People often like stories like that. They're neat, dramatic, and easy to explain. But that's not what actually happened. The truth is much quieter and much more powerful. For years, the man had the same abilities, the same opportunities, and the same potential he always possessed. What changed wasn't his intelligence or his luck. What changed was something so simple that most people overlook it entirely. He stopped disappearing. Instead of working only when motivation felt strong, he began showing up even on the days when enthusiasm was gone. Even on the evenings when progress felt painfully slow. Even when nobody else noticed his effort. And that simple decision created something extraordinary. Because every day he showed up, he added one more brick to the structure of his future. One more repetition. One more lesson learned. One more moment where his identity shifted from someone who tries to someone who continues. Here's the lesson hidden inside his story. Success rarely belongs to the most talented person in the room. Talent might start the race, but it rarely finishes it. What truly separates people over time is the ability to keep moving when progress feels invisible. Think about your own life for a moment. What skill, project, or dream have you started more than once? What goal have you promised yourself you would pursue someday when the timing felt perfect? Now imagine something different. Imagine choosing just one direction and giving it a small, consistent effort every single day. Not waiting for motivation, not chasing perfect conditions, just showing up. Because the truth is, the world doesn't change overnight. But a person who refuses to stop showing up eventually becomes impossible to ignore. And the next chapter of your life might begin the exact same way his did, with one quiet decision, to start today and continue tomorrow.